The horror stories we hear growing up sometimes leave us with a feeling of dread. The idea that someone or something might be lurking just beyond our sight, watching, waiting. For one family in the small town of Townsend, Massachusetts, this nightmare wasn't just a story, it was their reality. Welcome to today's episode where we'll explore the disturbing case of Daniel LaPlante, a name synonymous with fear, horror, and heartbreak. As we unravel his twisted story, you might find yourself checking behind your doors, listening for sounds in your walls, and questioning if you're truly alone. Daniel LaPlante was born on May 15, 1970 in Townsend, a small quiet town where neighbors knew each other and where life seemed peaceful and predictable. But Daniel's early life was anything but calm. He was a troubled child, enduring an unstable home life and significant emotional struggles. His parents divorced when he was young, and his mother remarried and had two more sons. But this is not all. Daniel claimed to have been sexually and psychologically abused by many adults in his life, which included his own father, his stepfather, and his psychiatrist. Reports from people who knew him back then describe him as a strange, withdrawn young boy with a penchant for disturbing behavior. In school, Daniel struggled with severe learning disabilities and social problems, but he played football and ran track. His classmates remember him as an outcast, someone who rarely interacted with others and often behaved in ways that left others feeling weird. He was even described as creepy, strange, and disturbed. He was frequently sent to the school counselor, but instead of receiving the help he needed, he was subjected to more trauma. The counselor allegedly abused him, deepening Daniel's isolation and anger. He was diagnosed with hyperactivity disorder when he was a teenager because of his abnormal behavior, his appearance, and the fact that apparently he didn't care much for hygiene. This young boy was on a dark path, one that would soon spiral out of control. As he got older, Daniel developed an obsession with breaking into homes, not to steal, but simply to be there. He would move objects around, rearrange personal items, and sometimes leave behind odd trinkets or messages. He craved the thrill of control, of lurking undetected in the shadows of someone else's life. These intrusions were just the beginning of his descent into darkness. In 1986, Daniel was a teenager, and it was around this time that he met Tina Bowen. Tina, a young girl from his school, had just lost her mother to a tragic illness. She was vulnerable, grieving, and looking for someone to talk to. Daniel, in his quiet, unnerving way, was drawn to her sorrow. He managed to get her phone number and called her, posing as a kind, sympathetic boy from a nearby school. The two began talking regularly over the phone. Tina found solace in what she thought was a blossoming friendship. Daniel claimed to be charming, even attractive, describing himself in ways that sounded like something out of a romance novel. But when Tina agreed to go on a date with him, she was in for a shock. Daniel was not the handsome, sensitive boy he had portrayed himself to be. Instead, he was awkward, poorly groomed, and unsettling in his behavior. Tina ended the evening quickly, uncomfortable and disappointed, hoping she'd never see him again. But Daniel's interest in Tina was far from over. What she didn't know was that Daniel had already set his sights on her, and he wasn't about to let her go. Soon after the awkward date, strange things started happening at the Bowen home. Tina and her sister began noticing that items were being moved around their rooms, and strange noises would echo through the house at night. Then came the messages, ominous notes written in what looked like blood, messages that threatened violence, messages that demanded the family leave or face the consequences. The Bowen sisters were terrified, convinced their home was haunted by the ghost of their late mother. But their father Frank tried to comfort them, suggesting that maybe it was just a trick or that their imaginations were getting the best of them. But he secretly thought that his daughters were either watching too many scary movies or they were playing pranks on one another. But one evening, when Frank came home, he found something chilling. Written on the walls in red were new messages. Messages like, "I'm in your room," and "Come find me." The sounds in the walls continued to intensify, often resembling quiet footsteps or faint scratching. So one evening at around 5:30 p.m., Frank, Tina, her sister Karen, and her friend Kathleen walk into their home after a long day. The second the door opens, they feel like something is different. The house didn't quite feel the same, and before even noticing anything specific, they knew things weren't as they had left them. The radios and TVs were blasting all around the house, and every single light in the house was on. So Frank, having 3 young girls with him, starts going from one room to another. But honestly, he didn't even know what he was looking for, cause his first thought was, this must be a prank. Maybe neighborhood kids? This is not the sort of thing that could be real. It didn't feel real. But as he was trying to keep calm, searching his brain for a reasonable explanation, he mindlessly opened a closet in Tina's room, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Inside, crouched in the small, cramped space, was Daniel LaPlante. He was holding a hatchet in one hand and a steel wrench in the other. He was looking straight into Frank's eyes, his face painted and his hair sticking straight up in spikes. He then began to speak. With a calm, steady, and confident voice, he instructed Frank to get the girls and go into a bedroom. Frank yelled for the girls and tried to stand between them and the intruder to try and protect them. His heart was beating out of his chest, and he couldn't think. What could he do? There were 3 young girls with him. The oldest one, Tina, was only 14. How could he even remove the 3 of them from this situation safely? Was it even possible? As he looked back on the past few months, his throat got drier and drier. All the weird noises and missing objects. All the things he had chalked up to the girls playing pranks on each other. And it hit him. Daniel was not gonna let them leave the house alive. He'd been planning this for months. But then as Frank was following the girls into the bedroom, the thought just made him instantly react and take advantage of whatever opportunity he could possibly find. So the second he walked into the room after the girls, Frank slammed the door and shut it behind him. He now needed to think, but the girls were all screaming and crying and panicking, and Frank couldn't think. Suddenly, in the midst of all the crazy going on, Tina became so overwhelmed and upset that she yanked the bedroom window open and jumped out. But this high-risk act, while her father screamed for her not to do it, might have been the thing that saved their lives that night. Tina then ran to the neighbors and called the police. When the police arrived, they started calling the house landlines, but no one picked up. The good news was, even though they didn't have eyes inside the house and had no idea where the hostages and the intruder were or what they were doing, they could make out shapes that showed there was more than one person moving around in the house, which seemed very promising at the time. Then Frank came to the window and yelled for the police to help them. He didn't know whether the intruder was still in the house or had already fled the scene, but he lowered the 2 girls to the officer standing below and then jumped out of the window himself. Frank and his girls described the intruder as best they could, but they hadn't been able to see him well enough to describe him in detail, since his face was painted. Even the police and the dogs couldn't find anything around the area to tie the attack to any suspects. The only thing they did find was that the back door was left ajar and the hatchet and wrench were lying on the ground near the porch step. So, to the police, whoever was responsible had managed to escape from right under their nose. The fact was, Daniel hadn't just been hiding there. When the police arrived and searched the house, they discovered small holes drilled into the walls, secret tunnels between the rooms, and passageways that allowed him to move undetected. Daniel had been living inside the Bowen family home for weeks, possibly months, watching them, listening to them, and tormenting them from the shadows. The Bowen family's ordeal was over, but for Daniel LaPlante, this was only the beginning. By 1987, 1 year after the Bowman's ordeal, Daniel LaPlante's criminal behavior had evolved from unsettling pranks to something far more sinister. In December of that year, his path crossed with that of the Gustafson family. Priscilla Gustafson was a beloved member of the Townsend community, a nursery school teacher and a mother of 2 young children. Daniel broke into the Gustafson home, and what followed was an unimaginable tragedy. He expected to find the house empty. Like always, he just planned to steal some stuff, money, guns, whatever he could find, and get out of there. But he encounters 33-year-old Priscilla at home. She was pregnant, but sadly, she was not alone. With her was her 5-year-old son, William. Daniel pushes William into a cupboard and then takes his mother to the bedroom, where he rapes her and shoots her twice in the head through a pillow. Imagine how scared she was. She was pregnant, and her 2 children could easily become accessible to this monster. Imagine what she felt for the baby she was carrying when he placed the pillow over her head. The whole bed was drenched in blood. When he's done with Priscilla, he takes William out of the cupboard and leads him to the upstairs bathroom, where he drowns the 5-year-old in the bathtub. Then when Priscilla's 8-year-old daughter Abigail comes back from school, he takes her to the downstairs bathroom and drowns her in the tub. The 2 children were later found face down in the 2 bathtubs of the house. Andrew, Priscilla's husband, found his wife and children when he got back from work. He told the Los Angeles Times in 1990, quote, "I was too afraid of going to look for my children because I was afraid I'd find them dead. It was so shocking and unbelievable. I screamed, I wailed." End quote. The horrific crime stunned the small town, leaving everyone in a state of shock and terror. The police immediately launched a manhunt for Daniel LaPlante, who had left behind evidence linking him to the crime. For several days, law enforcement searched the area, warning residents to stay inside and lock their doors. The community was paralyzed by fear, haunted by the idea that a killer could be lurking in any home, hiding behind any wall. Finally, Daniel was apprehended, hiding at a nearby hotel. When he was taken into custody, he showed no remorse, no hint of regret. It was as if he believed he'd done nothing wrong. The young man with a past full of trauma and violence had transformed into one of the most chilling killers the town had ever known. In 1988, Daniel LaPlante faced trial for his horrific crimes. The courtroom was packed with people desperate for answers. But Daniel remained silent, showing no remorse for what he'd done. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was convicted of the murders of Priscilla, Abigail, and William Gustafson. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But even behind bars, Daniel continued to cause chaos. In the years following his conviction, he attempted to sue the state for violating his religious beliefs. claiming that they didn't provide him with materials for weekend rituals. His disturbing behavior and lack of remorse left the people of Townsend haunted by the memory of his crimes. LaPlante appealed for a reduced sentence in 2017, but the judge found that he was not remorseful for his crimes. Instead, the judge affirmed LaPlante's sentence of 3 consecutive terms of life imprisonment. LaPlante, now 53, must wait another 7 years before he is eligible for a parole hearing.
There is a hole in my heart that will never be filled until I meet them in heaven.
A recent Supreme Court ruling means he must now be resentenced since he was a juvenile at the time of the crime.
But I am truly sorry for the harm that I've caused.
Today, LaPlante stood and faced the judge, not the victim's family, as he stated his sorrow. But the family isn't buying it. Priscilla Gustafson's husband, Andy, remarried in the years after the murders. He passed away several years ago. But today, his second wife spoke on his behalf.
Mr. LaPlante extinguished Andy's family for no apparent reason, sidelined his career, sent him into bankruptcy, ruined his health, and left him a shell of a man for a very long time.
So Daniel LaPlante, for the murder of my sister Priscilla and her unborn child, I forgive you.
Priscilla Gustafson's brother said today he forgives LaPlante for all 3 murders, but he made it clear to the judge, forgiveness is a spiritual thing. It is not a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Daniel LaPlante's story isn't just a tale of a troubled young man. It's a horror story that became a reality. A young man who hid in walls, lived in secrecy, and preyed upon unsuspecting families. His actions shattered lives and left a dark stain on the community of Townsend. The next time you hear a strange noise in your house or catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of your eye, remember this story. Sometimes the monsters we fear most aren't the ones we imagine. They're the ones who hide in plain sight. Thank you for joining us on this journey into darkness. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and click the bell for more stories that reveal the chilling side of human nature. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and always trust your instincts. Please leave any theories or comments you might have for us down below. We're really interested to know what you think about this case.